Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
Thanks, Scott. Yes, our guest today is Aaron Kirkham. Aaron is the owner of Conmigo Vacation Rentals. I hope I pronounced that right, which manages 50 plus vacation rentals. He created the Venture Base, which is a boutique hotel in Kanab, Utah. He's a community focused and manages several community groups focused on short-term rentals. That's really his forte. It's really what he does best, his superpower, if you will, is he's all about short-term rentals. I don't know whether you'd actually call that Airbnb, but let's find out. Aaron, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about you. Were you born and raised in Utah, or?
Yeah, great. I'm from my promised land of Idaho. I grew up in Podunk, Pocatello. I love it there, but granted, I was called to other places, so to speak. I grew up. My family does a lot of commercial real estate, and so I kind of came up in that game a little bit. But then my wife and I took an adventure, and I took a job in Mexico. We worked in there. I was a liaison between some cruise ships and some retail locations. From there, we kind of came back, and then, like a lot of people, tried the house hacking method, but then found Airbnb, and it really kicked off for us. I mean, we had some good success, a lot of good failure at the same rate, and now we have our company, Conmigo Vacation Rental, that really focuses a lot on that short-term rental, mid-term rental, fully furnished model to help people maximize their cash flow.
So I'm assuming that Conmigo is a shortening of Con Amigo, with friends. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, in
Okay.
Spanish, conmigo means with me, and so a lot of our approach is we want people to come stay with us, with me at our house, and kind of give them the local feel. But then, kind of our motto is where adventure comes home, because a lot of our places that we have, people aren't coming to the specific area to stay at my home. My home might be great, might be beautiful, but the reality is they're coming for some adventure, be it family, be it skiing, rock climbing, whatever it might be. And so the whole idea is, where adventure comes home, and you kind of stay with me and have a local experience, and a cozy one.
So tell us about your very first deal. How did that go? How did you find out about it? What gave you the crazy idea to turn it into an Airbnb?
Yeah. So my wife and I, we found that a lot of people within our world that were successful, they found ways to live for free or to mitigate their expenses. And so we bought cars and paid for them in cash. So then that way we didn't have car payments, good old clunkers. And then also my wife, she took a position as a live-in property manager at a complex that we were the property managers for 50 units. And we just learned a lot about that game when we came back from Mexico. And in that process, we bought a home with the intention of moving in, but we noticed in the complex that rents were really rising, like not just a little bit, but they're really rising. So we said, let's just throw long-term tenants in it. We did that for about a year, and then it was then time for us to buy another house. And we bought a house that was just a little bit bigger for us, and really we bought it with the intention of doing a mother-in-law in the basement, because that's really traditional what everybody does. But then there was this area that could be a studio, and I had a friend that said, oh, this Airbnb thing, it's great. And I said, well, let's give that whole crazy thing a try. And it was terrible. I mean, it was a bed on bricks, just horrid. Brown couches, brown walls. Like, it just, I actually keep the listing for our whole team to still see it, so they can see where we came from and how terrible it was compared to where we're at now. But in the first month, we expected to make $300 extra, 400 max, because that was kind of a long-term rate. And we made 600 in the first month, 800 in the next, and 1,200 in the next, just from renting out I mean, they literally walked in my front door. It wasn't like a separate entrance. Walk in my door, say hello to me, hello to my terrible kids. And from there, we just realized that there was something to it. So I kicked my brother-in-law out of my in-law, kicked our tenants out. I mean, waited for their leases to lapse. My brother-in-law we kicked out. And just did our own short-term rentals. And then from there, had conversations like this, and then realized that we could manage for other people. And it kind of grew from there.
Wow, that's amazing. Um, So it didn't sound like the very first one was totally successful, yet it was enough to get you to go to the next step.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I mean, there was, in hindsight, there were so many things that were just, I mean, and looking at it from an Airbnb perspective now, like, I don't know if anybody would have the same success because it was somewhat of a different time. It was kind of I mean, I would call COVID during that time frame and right before it, a lot of people launched into the space with rental arbitrage, and just hearing about it. And we were just a little bit in front of that curve, and where we have a home that's in Sandy, Utah, which is at the mouth of four of the best ski resorts in the world, and so that was a lot of the driving factor because we launched in winter, but it was just enough to say there's clearly something to this. That and then the further down we got going through it, it was more of a a professionalization. It's just realizing how can we make a little bit more with better tools, with better design, with better aspects that way, and that really helped open it up more for us to get more deals and more opportunities.
So let's assume that someone is listening right now and they're all about, hey, I want to get into this space. Um, just take a few seconds and first define for us what is Airbnb and what is it all about. I mean, you've kind of said it.
Sure.
Let's be a little bit more clear.
Yeah. So a lot of people call short-term rental Airbnb. Like I have an Airbnb. In reality, you have a short-term rental, which is a place where you host people for less than 30 days. That is what it constitute as a short-term rental or vacation home. And Airbnb has become the colloquialism that a lot of people use. But it's also a trigger word because if you in some neighborhoods, if you say I have an Airbnb in my basement, they have read the terrible stories about the fights, the things, when in reality it's a short-term rental. So that's one aspect of it. The other one, I mean, for sake of our conversations, is midterm rental. Midterm rental is fully furnished 30 days plus, traditionally with a maximum of about 4 months. That is very much a growing market right now here in Utah and throughout the United States. But it's really a form of uh, fully furnished. And then last, long-term rental would be really 30 days more unfurnished, traditionally 6 months or longer. Um, so that's kind of a classification of it, and kind of get into your question of how to get into it. A lot of it I think comes on the strategy and really what the goal is, because if the goal is you want cash flow, rental arbitrage, which is a rental arbitrage is where you go to a landlord and say, I will rent your home, I'll rent your apartments if you allow me to sublease, to which then you put furniture in and do short-term or mid-term rental. If cash flow is the game, arbitrage is a great way because there's not a lot of expenses that are required to go into it besides furniture and deposits for rent. But there's also a high level of risk in that. Versus if the goal is you're trying to build equity, purchasing homes, this is a fabulous way to facilitate both. Where if you can get a home on creative finance, seller finance, which is kind of the avenue of how we focused on getting deals, you can get the home, but instead of just doing it as a long term by furnishing it, you increase your cash flow to either pay off the asset faster or to use that cash flow to facilitate the next deal sooner. Because traditionally with short term rental, it is 2 to 3 times rental rates for long term, meaning if you cash flow $500 from a long term, traditionally a short term should cash flow 1,000 to 1,500 comparatively, with midterm being about 1.5 to 2 times as much as long term, give or take.
Okay, so there are obviously some secrets and there's some pitfalls. Let's talk a few minutes about some secrets or some, let's say, the top four things you need to be aware of when you're going to go into short-term rentals.
It's a great question, and I love. So probably number one thing is the level of professionalism and expectations have risen for guests and owners. 3 years ago, with COVID, really you could throw grandma's old furniture in a basement and you would rake in the dough. Those days are over. You no longer can do that. And there has to be an aspect of professionalism, meaning competent design, that things are designed in a cute way and structured towards a specific target market, or we call it a guest avatar. Um, so a level of professionalism has to be there, as well as a level. And with that, the reason for that is guest expectations have risen too, because over the past, really COVID, what happened is a lot of people shifted how they focused on travel, and they went to drivable markets. Drivable markets are locations that are within 8 hours of where people live. And so because of that, people stayed at a lot more Airbnbs, and they would stay at good ones and plenty of bad ones. And so now the expectations for guests of just any Airbnb is a lot more elevated because they've stayed at great places and they've stayed at terrible places. The media has also amplified fees and all that concept as well. So if you're getting into it, realize now that there's a level of professionalism that you have to have. And I use this example a lot, just because it's really interesting. I think within my field, a lot of people see an Airbnb as a side hustle approach, which for some people it really is, and it's an easier side hustle. But the reality is, so is trading stocks. I mean, if somebody goes at it, you can go to Robinhood, you can go to E-Trade, and you can do that. But we all know conceptually, really, if you want to make real money, you need to work with a professional who does it all day because they see it all day. That same mentality is now shifting into the vacation rental, short-term rental space. Is that truly people, I call them dogs, people who are dogs and are really doing it, they're professional. So that's one thing I would say. The second aspect of it is be aware of your liabilities, and meaning that there are a lot of ways in which people go into it and they think I'll throw furniture in there, but then they don't realize that there are plenty of insurances that exist out there to facilitate and protect from terrible circumstance and from incidental circumstance. Meaning a great example is, and anybody can see this on any forum that you go to, people will say, I'm so frustrated because my guests stay in the sheets and now I've got to pay $50 for sheets. Well, the reality though is it can be a cost of business if you elect to do it, but there are incidental insurance or damage insurances, which the hospitality industry already has these products where you're paying a little bit per reservation to be able to submit to these insurances and say, my sheets got damaged, pay me for my sheets, and they do. And that is something that revolutionized our business, as well as proper homeowners insurance. And there's even short-term rental specific policies that cover you for the crazy stuff. Regrettably, I mean, and this is more of a once in a lifetime nightmare aspect. We have one owner that there was a personal injury claim that happened at the property. They have now, they're going through the process now, and they're settling essentially at $1.2 million for the settlement, but their home insurance policy will only cover $500,000 because they didn't have the right insurance in place. And it's stuff like that, obviously, that can destroy your business. So make sure you're aware of your liabilities and really, investigate and realize that insurance is worth it. Though it sucks today, you're going to love it in a little bit. I mean, great example, 2 weeks ago, guests froze my pipes in my own personal home, our very first Airbnb that we ever had. The insurance cover, and we actually, through the associated insurances that we have and guest policies, we made money off of it. So we love damage, though we don't love damage because it hurts our homes, but like we get better things out of it if you're doing it right. So I would say that that's the second thing. The third is just be aware that you're creating a micro hotel. I mean, if you host somebody in your basement now, you have to factor in the fact that you have to have a form of 24/7 concierge services. Not that you have to provide tours, but you have to be available to answer the questions. And it's always the Wi-Fi question, no matter how many places you tattoo it on their body, they will ask. There's that. There's a form of maintenance that you now have to have 24 hours. You have to have cleaning standards. You have to have linen and laundry services. And you also have to have an action plan for when crazy things happen, but you need a new guest. And an example oftentimes is people smoke either marijuana or cigarettes in homes, and it leaves an odor. And initially, when you walk in, and if you don't have a plan, like you open the windows and you fan as much as you can, but that's not the real solution. The real solution is get an ozone generator. It's $100 on Amazon. You throw it in for an hour, and it kills all the bacteria and gets rid of the smell, and problem solved. As opposed to your first time, if you don't know that and you're not set up realizing that you're a micro hotel, that that is going to be so much more stress. And the last part of it, I would also say, is there are so many tools out there to offer success that don't focus and don't think that you have to become the expert of all of it. It's actually with another partner of mine. We started another company that is called the STR Hub. And basically, it is a centralized website to where anybody can go to get information on the plethora of platforms and softwares that are out there that help maximize and facilitate your business. And there's dynamic pricing tools that, just like hotels, how they shift pricing, same thing. There's that. There are turnover services, there's operation softwares, there's guest management services. I mean, there's so much. And so I think sometimes when you get into it, we all think you have to do it on your own, but it leads immediately to host burnout, which is kind of an industry standard. It's something that we call it, which is where you're just burnt out. And regardless of what the guest says, you just want to murder them because you're just so fed up with it. When the reality is, you don't have your own processes in place to be able to communicate effectively.
Okay, there's two things. First, I want to come back to number 4 because there's something there that really fits in with what we do on this podcast. But the first thing I am really surprised that you didn't say anything about location of your Airbnb. I have in my head that you need to have, it needs to be in San Diego within 20-minute walk of the beach, besides,
Sure, no.
you said having, nice interior, good furniture, an atmosphere, all these different things, but also like, and you even mentioned it, well, I have this house. It's right at the mouth of, I think, Big Cottonwood Canyon or Little Cottonwood Canyon, right there where the ski resorts are in Utah. Am I missing something, or is
No, I mean, that's a really great question because, I classify that there are 3 types of short-term rental investment. There is residential, where really it is a traditional home that could be run as a long-term, but just so happens that you elect to put furniture in and run it as a short-term rental. The upside is it's easier to get into from a cost standpoint, and you can facilitate your money farther. The downside and the biggest aspect is the city could come in at any time and change ordinances, and now you're out. Or a neighbor could get frustrated for reasons and take the vendetta out on you. And this probably goes to the aspect of, because you're right, no doubt that the home in San Diego will perform better because it's the beautiful vacation home. But because specifically Airbnb has been a disruptor to the hospitality industry, people view travel so much differently now because they legitimately think, and really Airbnb has become a search engine, just like YouTube is a search engine, that if you and I today, we say, hey, let's go to Phoenix, our first thing that we're going to do is we're going to pull up Airbnb and say, is there a place we could stay? Oh, that's way too expensive. Never mind, let's not go there. Or I could say at this dump for $30. Yeah, let's do it. And really the mentality of travel has changed for travelers. And so even places that traditionally wouldn't work are even producing it. And that includes small towns. Like we for a time frame ran a home in Vernal, Utah, which is clearly known for their tourism. Not. Vernal, 5,000 people. Clearly there's the summertime because they have a dinosaur national monument out there. But wintertime, there's no reason to go to Vernal because it's an oil town. Even in locations like that, wherever people live, people are going to travel and families are going to meet. And so there's still an opportunity to approach the residential model of investment, because if people are there, people are going to consider staying at a home that has larger amenities compared to a hotel or motel. So that's the first. The second is touristic areas, which is the San Diegos, the Park Cities, the Bear Lakes, the Moabs. Traditionally, you're paying more entry fee, and the barrier of entry is higher because you're paying more for a home. It's guaranteed revenue that you're purchasing during high seasons. And as an example, there's a condo that we manage in Park City that it is a 1-bedroom condo, essentially in the canyons. During ski season, traditionally how the months goes, we make 10,000, 13, and 14,000. And then when mud season, so basically March, we make 600, 800, and negative 400. Now that's an extreme example, but really what somebody who's buying that condo, they are guaranteed high season revenue. But during low seasons, you can't pay people to go there. And the other aspects of touristic areas is appreciation value is always there. And this isn't the nicest way to say it, but we all think of it this way. It's more of a joking. Is there's always the next dummy who's going to buy the condo in Park City, because every family's going to say, oh, we love Park City, we love to ski there, we're going to buy there, and we're going to go ski so much. And the reality is everybody skis 2 times the first year, half time the next year, and then their kids are too old and they moved on and they don't want to go because they want to be on their iPhones more. I mean, but because it's a touristic area, everybody's willing to continually invest into those markets. And then the last is, I call it wild and crazy or boutique, which are unique stays. And that's the glampings, domes, tiny homes, boutique hotels, out in the boony stuff, the crazy things that it's a high risk and it's a high reward. And specific to those ones, that's really where location plays in. That you have to be in great locations or strategic locations. And the reason I say that is if we had two tiny homes, one that's in Moab, I mean, it's still an aspect of the touristic that you're guaranteed some of that. But then there's also still a market for middle of nowhere Utah for a tiny home, because there are individuals who want to disconnect. And if you build an appropriate brand around it and drive traffic to it, you can get people there. So it's generally, that's how I classify it. Now, clearly, as we all know with real estate, there are 3 laws: location, location, location. And no doubt, wherever you can have it, that's the best location, you're going to profit more. But the reality is it doesn't always have to be that way, because then, sorry, kind of going down this route here, and I feel like I'm talking too much, but even from here, we even can shift into the midterm rental model, which is traditionally with residential homes, it's people who are staying for longer timeframes with insurance claims, contractors who are building homes, people waiting for their homes to be finished. This is actually very common since the Great Migration, meaning post-COVID, is a lot of people will stay and rent in areas for 6 months to a year to figure out where they want to live in the area. We actually just had my second home that we purchased that is now a short-term rental. We just cleaned up after a guest that had been there for 9 months because they were trying to find the right area of where they wanted to buy a home. And really, they would have stayed for longer, but we had better reservations come up because they said they only want to be there 9 months. So we opened the calendar and we had ski season booking. So, yeah.
Our conversation with Aaron Kirkham was so amazing. We have decided to break it into 2 episodes. So stay tuned for part 2 next week.
If you'd like to connect with our guest, we will drop all the links in the show notes down below. If you'd like to connect with Jason or I, make sure you hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or shoot us an email. All the links, again, are down below. If you like the show, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a 5-star review. It really helps us out. And last, remember, mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best. Catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.